That was the most catalytic moment for me to who I am now, for sure. I had to say that courageous yes in order to get to where I am. It's like you put out that marker, that lighthouse, if you will, or vision, and then all of a sudden that starts to shape your brain and move you and shift things to ultimately where you end up. Self-awareness is that foundation of any leader. If you don't have self-awareness, you really can't have good leadership. You need to know yourself very well. Then accountability is the nails that hold your leadership house together. Without accountability, things are going to crumble on you and crumble, unfortunately, on other people too. And then growth is the walls and the roof. It's the opportunity to have a growth mindset. Empowerment's the windows and doors. So this is where people see your leadership. They look through those windows and then they're observing how you lead other people and how you lead yourself, what your example is.
How many of us struggle with accountability? Like in a leadership position with a team, you find it challenging to hold them accountable for their and the team's commitments. It can be frustrating at times, that's for sure. Now, how about in your personal life? How is your personal accountability? If you're the average human being, you've probably got areas in your life where accountability is no problem, while in others, it's like pulling teeth. Yeah, it's painful as heck, isn't it? Well, today my guest is going to share his secrets on what it takes to create a cadence of accountability in your life and in your organization. Now, before we get into all that, I just want to remind you to hit like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platforms so you can stay updated on the latest content while helping me grow the Awakened Man message. And for that, I just want to say I'm truly grateful. Now, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of The Awakened Man and your host, Alan DeMonso. Do you struggle with personal accountability? And how about in your career? Let's face it. Does anyone like to be held accountable? I know we may say we do, but really, it's not the best feeling when you're being held to a higher standard, whether that is coming from you or for someone else. Well, let me rephrase that. At least it's not in the moment. And it takes time for us to see the fruits of our labors, doesn't it? And today we're going to spend some time in between those spaces and discuss how accountability can positively shape our lives. But first, I want to introduce my guest. Kyle Gillette has helped small business owners and leaders around the world to take their businesses from good to great. He's an ICF-certified coach, behavioural analyst, and a creator of the SAGE mindset framework, which helps leaders and small business owners become the leaders that they are meant to be. And as a mindset coach who specializes in helping clients understand how their thoughts affect their lives and businesses, Kyle understands what it takes for someone's mindset to change. Welcome to the show, Kyle. How are things today?
I'm good, Alan. Thanks for having me. I love shows like this. It's exactly the stuff that's worth talking about and makes a big difference in people's lives.
Yeah, I really liked your idea and your topic here today, talking about this cadence of having accountability in our lives, not just at work, but at home as well. And I always start off the first question for my guests is to talk about being on a hero's journey. I think we can all agree that we all live our own hero's version of our hero's quest. And for you today, the question I have for you is tell us about your journey and how the trials and tribulations and as well as the successes has paved the road for who you are today and the work that you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that question. I grew up on an orange farm in the Central Valley of California, and I remember one summer I was working for my dad, and he had me pruning orange trees. And for those of you who aren't familiar with orange trees, they're basically giant bushes that go all the way down to the ground that are up to 12 feet tall or so. And in the Central Valley, it's 105 to 115 degrees in the summer, typically. And I was charged with pruning what are called the skirts of the orange trees. And it's just the bottom part because they had been burned, they had been killed by some weed spray. And so I had to prune about 5 acres worth of orange trees, which is a lot of orange trees, and all by myself. And it was literally killing me. First, it was hot, it was boring, it was horrible. So that was the summer that I decided this is not what I want to do. I don't want to be a farmer. And it was a huge catalyst for me. And it's not that I'm lazy and I don't want to do hard work like that. I just realized it wasn't a fit for me. And my dad and I kind of had this falling out that day.
Mm.
We're great now, and we were fine after that too. But it was that one of those catalyzing moments where you're like, this is not for me. This is not the thing I want to do. You can't count on me. And I'll talk about this later, but you can't count on me to do that as a living. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
And so that for me was one of those moments. There were several other ones that are much more positive that led me to where I am, but just wanted to start there because I think we sometimes a negative moment is what pushes us towards a different thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Kyle, because so many times we can take that negative experience. And, I can remember years ago in high school, I grew up in a mid-sized town, and our high school basketball team had never made it outside of its little area. And we were the first team to make it to provincial finals. And so it just so happened that same year, our football team, 9-man football team, hadn't lost a game all year. As a matter of fact, they hadn't lost a game in 2 years, other than the second year, the championship game. So think of that, 2 years. So here I am. It's my time to shine. I'm all excited about doing it, and winning and winning a second championship for this little town, and we fell short. And
Right.
as the captain of the team, I really carried that for years, right? And about how we can shape who we think we are as individuals. And so I like that you were able to take that and make the point about it being that could have been a detrimental piece, but it didn't do that to you. So tell me how you were able to do that and pivot, how that shaped who you are today.
Yeah, when I got to college, I studied kinesiology, which is exercise science, and the focus is physical therapy. And I remember sitting at my study desk in my apartment, talking to my parents on the phone,
Yeah.
and it was my senior year of college, and I was behind in units, and I didn't realize I was. And so it had me panicked, and I was really afraid about the next step in life because you go from having everything kind of directed for you. You have your classes, you have these certain things you have to study, tests, friendships, all this stuff is happening. And I was sitting there, and I was 30 pounds overweight. I happened to be covered in poison oak because we went on a hike and we went off trail.
Yeah.
And I got it everywhere. And I even went to the bathroom, and I even got it in a space you really don't want it. And so I was really a disaster, but it was really a microcosm of where my life was. All that was just this microcosm.
Yeah.
Talked to my parents about where I was and what I wanted to do. And they tried to encourage me, and they did a little bit, and then hung up the phone. And a couple weeks later, I got a call from my friend John, and he said, "Hey, Kyle, I have a job opportunity that you might be interested in." And I went, "Okay, what is this thing?" And so he told me about this men's mentoring program that was these guys that are 18 to 25 years old, live in this house, and their lives are off track. And they get their lives on track through this 6 month to 1 year program. And my job would be to live in the house with these guys and help them get on track. And as he's talking to me about this, I'm going, I'm off track. How am I even qualified to do this? But I courageously said yes. I'm still not sure to this day why I said yes, but I said yes and went to the interview. And I remember driving onto the property, and the way the program worked is we had a pet resort that supported the program. So it was self-sustaining, and they had chain link fences with a bunch of happy barking dogs and a couple barns. It was on 20 acres. It was this beautiful idyllic setting in the Central Coast of California. And I drove up to the farmhouse and parked the car, and there's this lawn with an American flag on it. I mean, everything's just like idyllic. Walk up to the front door, knock on the door, and meet the president and the director. Sit down, and for the next hour and a half, they just interview me, and I feel like I'm being pushed down into the couch or pulled, or just like I belong in this place.
Mm-hmm.
And after the interview, Jack, the president, asked me, he says, "So do you want the job?" You don't normally get that type of question right after the first interview. I mean, it was only an hour and a half of getting to know one another. But because of feeling like I belonged, like I was being pulled into that couch, and the connection I made with those two gentlemen, I said yes. And that ended up turning into 9 years of being a part of that program in varying capacities, and became a big piece of what I have now. And I could talk about that in a minute here, but that was huge, to be courageous enough to say yes when I was a mess, and then interact with those guys that are also off track in life and help them along the way. And several other things happened that I can talk about as well. But that was the most catalytic moment for me to who I am now, for sure. I had to say that courageous yes in order to get to where I am.
Yeah, absolutely. And just it's so interesting, to me as I listen to you tell that story about how we never see these things in ourselves. And it takes someone else to see that, not just with your friend, but two complete strangers. And after 90 minutes, do you want the job? And and having that courageous yes and be able to move forward and spend 9 years in doing men's work, which is phenomenal. And I guess this was right in your early 20s, I'm suspecting,
Yep.
when you were doing it. So, and to do it at that age as well is phenomenal, right? To really learn, what it means to be a man and take responsibility for your life, I think is phenomenal. We'll get a little bit into your men's work at that time. I wanted to really dive into your SAGE mindset work and how you came up with that program, what does SAGE stand for, and tell us a little bit about your program.
Yeah. After being in Alpha Academy was the name of the men's mentoring program. It still exists. It's still going. It's a little bit different. But after being in that program, I was mentored in there by Jack, the president, for about 9 years. Every lunch we'd hang out on Tuesdays, and he'd mentor me. He'd mentor me mentally, socially, spiritually, professionally, every way. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be the man I am today. So the value of mentoring to me is just through the roof.
Mhm.
When my wife and I met and then got married and had a couple kids, we needed to decide what to do with our living situation, because my parents were 3 hours away and her parents were 19 hours away. And we wanted to raise our kids around grandparents. And that was another one of those agonizing decisions because I loved the job that I had. I loved mentoring those guys and doing what I was doing there. But I knew that my family was really more important than that, right? I needed to raise my kids in a place where they had grandparents nearby. So we ended up moving up to the Pacific Northwest to be close to her family. And in the process, I remember having a conversation with God and saying, if we're going to be moving up here, I want to have the type of impact on people in the Pacific Northwest as I am through the Alpha Academy. And I had no idea what that looked like, but it's like you put out that marker, that lighthouse, if you will, or vision,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden that starts to shape your brain and move you and shift things to ultimately where you end up. So fast forward through a bunch of job applications, a failed job and a failed business, to then I ended up working at a church in HR for 2.5 years, and it was a mega church. And so 3,000 attendees, 100 employees, and I was the HR director. And so I had to learn a ton because I'd never done that before. It was a really great opportunity. But in the process, I got into behavioral analysis, and that's the DISC world. And so I started doing DISC, and I did one of those assessments on every single employee in the church. So 100 of them, and I sat down with every single employee for an hour. So then I became really an expert in that area quickly. And then I realized, wait, I could do this as a living and do workshops and all this kind of stuff. So I got hooked up with a sweet contract with a local petroleum engineering firm around here. Did a contract that was a complete dumpster fire. But that's what I needed, because it gave me the courage to realize, wait, if I can fail this so much, but still it kind of worked okay, I can dive into even more. And then I'll tell you in a minute the rest of the how Sage came about. But that was what I needed. I needed
Yeah.
to dive in and take another risk and see what would happen. And it was scary and it didn't work out like I wanted it to, but it was totally worth it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Because again, the courage of the conviction to move forward, to make those, you had some really tough decisions there, right? Is you needed to decide how to really, what was the pull for your life, right? And family, while you're so much enjoying the men's work, the family was truly your root and what was important to you in that core. And then having to make that decision to move the family over and just make everything, change everything and really start from scratch. And I think for the listeners here today is the resilience is what I'm really picking up from you, Kyle, is that resilience and trust and faith that you may not have, while you had a vision of what your life wanted to be or was planted into, you didn't necessarily know each step. And so you were willing to try, right? And how different that would your life been had you not tried, you know? The other thing I wanted to get into is we talked a lot in the intro here about accountability. And I know you, in your work, you talk about the 3 different levels of accountability. I wonder if you mind touching a little bit on what you mean by that, and how how you came about with that idea.
Yeah, for sure. So after I started the business, I knew that I couldn't do whatever I wanted with disc because it's not mine. It's not my intellectual property. And so I knew somehow, I don't know how I knew this because I'm not that smart, but I knew I needed to create something that I could do whatever I wanted to with.
Sure.
And I love acronyms because it's how I remember things. It's a part of what makes it easier for me to remember things. And so I wanted to create a leadership acronym that I could share with other people and use as the foundation of my framework, my teaching. And I was laying in bed about a few months into the business and I had been thinking about this quite a bit. And it was 3 a.m. and a voice woke me up. I was dead asleep and I woke up and heard a voice say self-awareness. And I mean, people have heard that word forever, but it was for some reason it was missing from my acronym and it hit me. I jumped out of bed, ran into the kitchen, and for the next 4 hours, I'm sitting at the kitchen table with just my boxers on, shivering until 7 a.m., writing out the beginnings of what became Sage. And briefly, Sage is self-awareness, accountability, growth, and empowerment. So pillars of great leadership.
Yeah.
And the way I describe it is self-awareness is that foundation of any leader. If you don't have self-awareness, you really can't have good leadership. You need to know yourself very well. Then accountability is the nails that hold your leadership house together. Without accountability, things are going to crumble on you and crumble, unfortunately, on other people too. And when I say accountability, it's easy to think, ethics or morals. Yeah, there's that, but I'm more talking about the little stuff. Like you say you're going to do something, you fricking do it.
Yeah.
Or you make a commitment or a promise to somebody, you shake a hand, that type of accountability. It's really the smaller stuff. And then growth is the walls and the roof. It's the opportunity to have a growth mindset. And in a home, you have to remodel things and adjust things, move furniture, update things. And that's what we need to do as leaders with our leadership is update, remodel, adjust to fit the circumstances and as we personally grow. Empowerment's the windows and doors. So this is where people see your leadership. They look through those windows and then they're observing how you lead other people and how you lead yourself, what your example is. And then they watch it enough that they want to participate. So they knock on that door and they say, "Hey, can I be a part of what you're doing?" And you let them in, they join you. But it's also the other way where you're empowering people so much, back to like the Alpha Academy. We didn't want those guys to live there forever. We wanted to empower them so much that they did look out those windows and they went, wait, I can go start my own business, or I can go get a job. I can restart my life. And then we say, yeah, do it. And they walk out that door and they're empowered to do it. So that's what Sage is. And in particular, the accountability part is it fundamentally is what holds everything together. And I'll give you a little bit of a practical way to use it in a minute here, but that's the picture of the leadership house that I wanted to paint before I dove specifically into accountability.
Yeah, for sure. And I really like how you frame that, in the shape of a home, with putting that structure all together, because that's really the key to success in leadership, isn't it? Is having some form of structure. Because if we can't lead ourselves, we're going to be challenged with leading others. And if we need a framework, we all need a framework to figure that out. And just the other part I really liked about what you just said there, Kyle, is about the Alpha Academy. And I would suspect with your work as well is that it's there for a season. It's not some place that necessarily you want people to sit and be there forever. Although, that's nothing wrong with working with people for a longer period of time, but truly it's to see that growth and that last piece, that empowerment, getting them to that level, I think is really the catalyst of this work of what that you're doing and what you picked up with the Alpha Academy. Would you say that's a true statement?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, our goal was that these guys, they answered 3 questions. And I think we need to answer 3 questions in our lives from the big picture and the little picture. And those 3 questions are, where am I? Where do I want to go? And how am I going to get there? Those are the 3 questions that they had to answer. And I actually turned it into a book because I wanted to share it with other people. But those 3 questions asked in the various contexts of life. So let's just say 6 different contexts of life. Where do I want to go financially? Where do I want to go spiritually? Where do I want to go mentally, etc.? And then how am I going to get there? I forgot to ask, where am I? But anyway, go
Yeah.
through those three questions. And when you do that, you're creating what we call the life map. And when I'm
Yes.
working with my clients now, I do the same thing with them. I just give it a different name and framed it around more of the sage piece instead.
Sure.
But it's the same thing. We have to answer those questions. And in order to get there, we need accountability to get there.
You
And
betcha.
there's a lot of different ways to create that accountability, but um, I've basically reverse engineered the way that I do accountability. It's not the right way or anything, but it's a way that tends to work really well for me.
Yeah.
So if I can, I'll go ahead and share that right
Yeah,
now.
absolutely.
So what I use is something called the accountability pass. So back to those acronyms. Um, the PASS stands for passive, active, structures, and self. So passive accountability, active accountability, the structures that keep you accountable, and then self accountability. So the passive part is simply this. I'll be brief because I do a whole course on this stuff. But the passive is telling your story, telling a compelling story of what you're trying to accomplish. So whatever your goal is right now, Alan, whatever thing you're trying to accomplish right now, you come up with the story behind it, the why,
Yeah.
not the I want to lose 20 pounds or whatever it is. Not that you need to lose 20 pounds, but I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to lose 20 pounds. Well, people don't give a crap about that. And neither does your brain. That it's not very compelling. So you tell a more compelling story. You say, I'm going to lose 20 pounds so I can go hike this mountain, get to the top of this mountain and celebrate what it was like to be up there, right?
Yeah.
You tell a bunch of people this story that's far more compelling. And what that does is it creates this accountability because you tell 15, 20 people, and maybe 3 or 4 will actually follow up with you and say, hey, how's it going with your weight loss journey? Or how's it going with starting that business or whatever the goal that you have in mind is?
Yeah.
And that creates this passive accountability because they're just asking you because they care. The other part of passive accountability is you share your story as if you've already accomplished it. In other words, you tell your brain that you're in a future that doesn't exist yet. You share the story that you've lost 20 pounds. I'm feeling excellent. I climbed that mountain. It was a phenomenal experience. I did it with a bunch of buddies. We had a good time. I feel the best I felt in years. I got a six-pack now. I'm feeling healthy and strong. I'm eating really well. All these things that are in present tense so that your brain goes, wait a second, there's a gap between where I am right now and where you're telling me I'm going to be. And then your subconscious has to fix that gap. And because our subconscious is the most powerful computer in the world,
Yeah.
then boom, all kinds of crazy, wonderful ideas start to come to you out of nowhere. And that's, again, passive because all you did was tell a story and your brain's like, oh, I'll fix that problem. And boom, you've got your passive accountability. So those are the two pieces of the passive part. And then you get to active accountability. So from here, you've told your story to a bunch of people, you told your story to yourself. But now, from those people that followed up with you, you grab a hold of one of them. You say, hey, Joe, would you be willing to meet with me weekly or biweekly to talk about the goals that you have and the goals that I have and hold each other accountable? Call each other on our BS, but also encourage one another when things are going well. And when you do this, you get yeses. You do. People, men really, really want this. Whether we admit it or not, we really want this. And most men are pretty afraid to ask for this. But when you're asked, or if you ask, vast majority of the time you get a yes. So if you're thinking about this idea of accountability as I'm sharing it with you listeners, it's worth giving a shot. But the key is it can't be an email or text messages. That's not accountability. It needs to be, I call it eyeball to eyeball or ear hole to ear hole, either phone, video, or in person. And weekly or bi-weekly, it doesn't need to be every day or anything like that. But weekly or bi-weekly, just have that conversation. And there's a method we could talk about, but it'll take too long. But you meet and you discuss what's going on. So that's active. I'm going to pause just in case you have any input or questions.
I just love how you've started that all off, about telling your story and especially the three questions. And one of the things that we talk about here in The Awakened Man, and we always say that I know when a man's ready to do work, when he's ready to take responsibility for three things: for where he is, for who he is, and for who he aspires to become. So it's a very similar mindset and idea. And I think that is really the catalyst of moving forward. And so I really like that. And I liked how you frame the story part as well, and having it already done. and using that mindset that it's already in existence. Because I think we spend so much time in the future that's what deters us and makes us fall off our accountability piece, right? Because it's, well, I'll never get there because we don't embody it today. And again, I just like how you've really brought that into the present to keep it active. And while it was a passive piece, it's still actively involved inside of you. So I really like that. And of course, the accountability partner is that piece. And for sure, a text message, it's just so impersonal to do it that way. And it's a great way to avoid having to do something, right? It's like, well, I'll just send a text, right? And, you could BS your way through it when truly, if you're asking a friend, a colleague, and you've given them permission to call you on your BS, then I think you'll do much better. And so will they. Like the amount of respect that you gain for one another and the depth of having an emotional intimacy with another guy to have that can hold you to that standard, right? It's just so different. And I think it's really what we lack and what we've struggled with over these last 2.5+ years, right? So with that, I'll let you finish up the last the two S's here in your path.
Yeah. I did the accountability thing with Jack at the program for 9 years. And then we moved here and I did the accountability thing weekly with either 2 to 3 guys for 7 years. And now I have a mentor that I meet with every other week. And I wouldn't be the man I am, like at all, if it weren't for those conversations with those guys. And I mean, there was tears, there was prayers, there was irritation, there was every emotion and every heartache and every excitement and everything. A couple people got married in the middle of all that while I was meeting with those guys, and they've moved away, and some of them haven't moved away, but there's just this beautiful relationship journey that you get to go on with them. And I got to be a role in helping them become the men that they are. And obviously they helped me too. So 100% worth it. But when you get to passive, active, those are the first 2 letters. And then the first S is structures. And this is fairly straightforward. It's the things that you put in place to help you be reminded to act on the things you say you're going to do. So I just recommend 2 things, and there's 1,000 things you can do, but categories would be a calendar. Use a freaking digital calendar. If you don't use a digital calendar, get your freaking things together and get a digital calendar. And you put 2 things on that digital calendar: meetings with people.
Yep.
Right? As much meetings as you have with people, get them on there, get them organized, get them dialed in. And then also 90-minute blocks. Okay. I work with my clients, and one of the things we almost always arrive at, I try not to tell my clients what to do, but so we typically end up arriving here where they want to block time off. And I'm like, okay, let's do that. And my recommendation, even with busy multi-million-dollar business owners, is 3 90-minute windows per week. Try that. That's it. If you can do more, awesome. But 3 90-minute windows of time where it's working on the strategic, the planning, the very high level work. We could talk about Stephen Covey and the quadrant 2 stuff, but basically 3 90-minute windows. That's 4.5 hours. And if you have a normal, let's say 45-hour work week, that's 10% of your time. Can you spend 10% of your time focused on the big planning stuff, the really important items? The second thing is get a digital to-do list. If you don't like digital to-do lists, I get it, but they're super helpful because most of what we do is habits. And so sometimes we're trying to build a habit. You can add it to the to-do list. Other times we just want to make sure we're tackling those tasks throughout the week, like putting out the recycle or having a follow-up conversation with someone or whatever it is, but you put it on your to-do list. And then that helps keep you accountable to do that little thing. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a conversation with the client or with a friend or whatever that I type something quick onto my to-do list because they say something that then I say, hey, I'll help you with that. Or I think of something. Yeah. And I don't want to forget to do that because it's important. I want to honor them in that and help them in that. So the to-do list is huge. You put those 2 together, and those are a couple pieces of structure that you can use. You can also write a contract with your accountability partner and sign the contract that says you're going to do certain things by a certain date, and you hand it to them and they do the same for you. There's a myriad of things, but those are some options. And then the last S is self-accountability. So obviously nobody can hold you accountable but you, period. And if you think about the accountability pass, it's like a check engine light in your truck, right? You're driving along and that check engine light comes on and you happen to have a buddy sitting shotgun and he'll point it out to you. It's up to you whether you're going to do something about it or not.
Yeah.
A few weeks pass, he gets back in the truck and the check engine light's on again and you still haven't done anything. The passive accountability and the active accountability is that check engine light for you. In fact, short story for me, I had a check engine light literally come on in my truck. And I said to my kids, I was picking them up from school, and I said, we're going to take this in tomorrow. On the way home, the truck seized, the engine seized in the middle of the road. It was like hours from when it came on to when it seized. And I bring that up because sometimes that's what happens to us. That check engine light means something, and it could screw up your life, screw up your business, a relationship, whatever. So pay attention, especially when other people notice your check engine light. That's a problem. If they're noticing it, and you've ignored it, that's a really big problem. But it all comes down to you taking action. So, Alan, I want you to picture 3 frogs in a log.
Yeah.
And they're in this beautiful pond. And over on the side of the frogs, there's this lily pad, and there's this big, fat, juicy fly on there. And one of the frogs looks at the other 2 and says, I'm going to go get that fly. And the other 2 frogs look at him and go, okay, buddy. And then you're kind of shocked because the frogs are talking. But anyway, you look at the fly and you look back over. How many frogs are on the log?
Still 3.
Yes. Love it. Yes, there's still 3 because there's a difference between deciding and committing. Yeah. So this frog decided he was going to jump off, but until he's starting to spring off of that log and his toes are coming off, he's not committed. And so for us, as whatever goal we have, whatever thing we're pursuing, whatever vision we have, until we find that point of no return, that commitment point, like you're jumping out of an airplane, you can't climb back in. That's not accountability yet. When you get to that point of no return, now you're committed. And that's always the drive that I encourage people to have when it comes to the goals and the visions that they have. So that is the accountability pass.
Love it. Perfect. That is just perfect. And so true. The story of the 3 frogs, and how often do we do that in our lives, right? Where we say we're going to do something, but we don't actually take the steps or the action to make it happen. And it's all part of, I think, going back to something else you talked about earlier on in your sage, you really talked about the accountability piece. To me was more about in the integrity. If you say you're going to do something, then do it. And it's really about having that, what kind of integrity we have as individuals. So you also talk a lot in your work about having goals. And so why is it so important that we get clear on having goals and how they can help shape us?
Yeah, goals. There's an interesting thing about goals, and that is that often we create goals to get away from something, right? So we create a goal that moves us away from being poor, being in a living situation that we don't like, or whatever it is. But that's a bad way to create goals. We need to create goals that move us toward something. But in order to be able to move toward something instead of away from something, we have to be content, or at least satisfied with the effort of what we're putting into the current situation, right? So if I'm content with, okay, I'm starting to lose weight, or my business is growing at the pace that I want it to grow, but it could be faster. Now, instead of moving away from a business that's not doing well, and I just want to have a better business, now you're moving from, I'm happy with the progress that's happening, and I'm moving toward 6 figures. I'm moving towards whatever the thing is. And that difference is huge, because if you are moving away and you get to this new place in your business, you're still going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
You're still going to have that attitude because you weren't content in the first place. You can't move from non-contentment and then try to enhance your non-contentment. That doesn't make any sense. You have to move from contentment to enhance the contentment and even more. So the first thing when it comes to goals is we got to do that. Yeah. And the second thing is, with goals, you need to have a relationship with them. Because any sort of relationship we have with anybody, you spend time with them. You spend one-to-one time with that person, or group time with that person. The same is true of goals. You need to spend one-to-one time with that goal, planning on it, creating the specific process you're going to do to achieve it, the SMART goal side of it, all that stuff. And then you keep it in front of you. You know, keep your vision. I'm pointing to my wall here. Keep your vision in front of you. Keep all these things in front of you so you have a relationship with it. When you do that, Now you've created some accountability and you can start to make progress on your goals. And without goals, it's really hard to tell where I've gone. You know, a goal tells you where do you want to go, but if you're not tracking the goal, you don't know if you're getting there. And so
Yes.
fundamentally, I believe you got to have clear goals that you're tracking so you know the progress that you're making.
Absolutely. If anything worth measuring is worth doing, right? And so unless we're going to take the time to be really clear on that goal and then spend some time measuring it, it's some of the, I think it's so important that we have that some sort of tool, and it doesn't have to be, a maniac and track every minute of every day. However, it has some semblance of milestone to help move the needle. It gives you that sense of developing, especially if you're going to try to develop a new habit. I really like how James Clear talks about similarly in goals and attaining and in developing a new habit. It's really about that micro piece. And if we needed to do it to that, as I said in the intro, right? Some areas of our life we're really accountable. You don't need much effort. You just do it because it's just part of who you are. But then there's those other aspects where you might need a little bit more accountability piece. And that's where, how you're talking about it. And so that also leads me to wondering is how do you sync values in with this, with the work that you're doing and with goals? Like, how does values play a part in all of this?
Yeah, 100%. So values in my book, I talk about how values are the rebar to your foundation. They put the pressure on your foundation to hold it strong and keep it together. That's the point of physical rebar. Yeah. So when you have values in place, they serve as putting pressure on the decisions that you make. They serve as putting pressure on the external influences that you have, so that when you get those points where someone is asking you to do something that doesn't fit your values, even if it's not a bad thing, but it just doesn't fit your values, you feel that pressure, but you can withstand it because you filter through those values and you say, actually, I'm not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And that's that opposite side of accountability that it's rarely talked about. Mm-hmm. And that's that people want to know what you can be counted on for, right? People want to know that. And that's really important. We should figure that out. That's why we have job descriptions. That's why we have contracts with one another, all these things. But what is it that you can't count on me for?
Yes.
Right? And your values are what help you to filter that, to know what you're not going to be able to do or you don't want to do. And then you can stand firm in it because they're values. They're tied to who you are. They're tied to your beliefs. And without those values, you can't set good goals, because where is that goal taking you? And why are you even doing it if you don't know what your values are? Right. So I believe that values, it's the first mindset I put in my book. It's the most important and foundational mindset of being a sage leader. And then, of course, you've got to tie that to vision too. But without values, it's so difficult to have something to filter through.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. Like it because with values, it's really that, like you're saying, it's that foundation, that rebar that helps start to define really who we are, what we're willing to stand for and not stand for. And the clearer we can get. And the other thing I like about, what I'm hearing you saying is that I get the sense that your values have probably shifted and changed a little bit over time, especially from that first discussion you had with your father about the trees, right? And about the orchard, to where you are today, that the values may be still there, but it's a different word and you've described it different and it's evolved and it's changed. And would you say that's a true statement for the people that you work with and people in general?
Yeah, true statement for me, true statement for people in general. And I think it's okay too. Mm-hmm. As you evolve, as we grow and we reshape or remodel that leadership house and who we are, the values are going to adjust slightly. Yeah. And that's okay. And it helps you also. It's that clear evidence that things are happening, that changes are happening. Do you have a favorite football team or basketball team or anything like that, Alan?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm up in Canada here, so you probably haven't heard of the football team, but it's the Saskatchewan Roughriders. That's where I grew up, in that lovely province. Actually, the New York Jets just stole our green color. So anyways, but yeah.
What the heck? So when you think about the Roughriders, you probably know what the box score is, right? I don't know how far they're into the season right now. I think the season started already, but yeah, you know their record, you know who the quarterback is and what his stats are, that kind of stuff. But what I find fascinating about leadership and about individuals is we rarely have stats on ourselves. We rarely have a box score for ourselves. And that drives me nuts. And so for me and with my clients, I want to help them create that box score. What is, at a glance, what is your box score? What's going on with you that we know you're developing? So I approach it in a couple different ways, but one of them is I just have these 6 things that I work on. They're that quadrant 2 stuff, or the important but not urgent stuff in my life that I know is developing me, my family, and my business, right? They're actions I take that do that. And then I track them. They're color coded on my calendar and on my Google sheet that shows I spent this many hours in this activity, this many in this one. And I just do it once a week. It's not really hard because it's already in my calendar. And the second thing is I took this so serious that I'm like 2 weeks away from the app being done, because I've taken Sage Mindset and I've taken each of those pillars and created several prompts as it relates to each of those pillars. So self-awareness, what's the mindset that you want to focus on? And what you do is you evaluate that particular mindset through the prompt, you journal about it for as much as you want to journal, and then you rate yourself yourself on a scale of 1 to 5.
Yeah.
And then you move on, you rate yourself in a particular accountability area, you journal about it, and then the other 2 as well. By the time you're done with this, if you do it, the science says 63 days to develop a true habit or to break a habit, but you do this for 63 days and you build up that habit and you're locked in and you get to that 100% level. So that 1% improvement, like James Clear talks about, but it's tracked. So you get to see that, and that's gamified and exciting. But even more importantly, you're journaling. And journaling, if there's anything that I can share that would change the lives of all the men that are listening to this show, it's journaling. And it sounds weird, a diary, I'm going to write a diary. No, it's a journal, and it's amazing. And when you track that, it's like you get to look at your thoughts.
Yeah.
And when you look at your thoughts, then your brain has a chance to adjust how you think. And when you adjust how you think, you get better outcomes. And so you do this day in and day out, and you get scored for it. You score yourself, but you get to see the improvement, and this makes it encouraging. You get on leaderboards and you get streaks and all this kind of stuff, but you put it together and now you have a scoreboard for yourself in those 4 particular areas, and you're guaranteed growth. It's as simple as that, because you're paying attention.
Absolutely. And let's, and great point about the journal piece of it, right? And think about the most famous journal out there today and I would say is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how many people has lives of that changed? Now, our own personal journals may not change the lives as Marcus's has, but the point of bringing that up is that absolutely being able to journal and taking the time to do that in our day-to-day lives helps us grow and expand in who we are. And so I'm really grateful that you brought that up today. But through all this work, at some point in time, you must have encountered for yourself and with people, the men that you work with and others, that we get, I know I do anyways, there'll be times I struggle with this imposter syndrome. And it's about and the challenge of being able to break through that. So what can you offer for our listeners today about how they can overcome this lack of confidence and feeling like they're being an imposter?
Yeah, I had an introduction call with a client probably a couple years ago now. And he and I were talking about this new marketing program that he wanted to pitch to construction businesses. It was basically a way to promote the people within the business, like what they're doing and how cool their culture is, to the business. And then eventually that would also bring in new people. It was a brilliant idea. And so we fleshed it out a little bit, but he was feeling that imposter, like, I've never worked in the construction business. How could I do this and that? And I said to him, I said, if you were to be meeting with this prospect and you were to have the conversation with this person, would you be confident in the sales part? Could you confidently do the sales part? And he said, yeah, I know how to do the sales part. And so we talked some more, and fundamentally what it boiled down to was he wasn't confident about the system. So he knew it would work. Like, he knew he could make it work, but he didn't have the nuts and bolts dialed in. And often that, I think, is a big piece of why we don't feel very confident and we feel this imposter, because we don't have the nuts and bolts dialed in. We don't have that system to the point where we want it to be. And then we feel fake. We feel like an imposter, and then it holds us back. And so that was a big piece for him. And I said, well, why don't you have the conversation with him? But before, send me your system, dial it in, And so he sent it to me over, I think it was 3 days later, he sent it to me. And then the next day he met with the guy and won a $50,000 contract because he spent the time to work out his system. And it wasn't perfect. And that's not the point.
No.
It's just get wherever you're feeling stuck, wherever you're feeling like an imposter, even if it's being a parent, if you're feeling like an imposter as a parent, what is your system of parenting? How do you parent your children, right? If you're feeling like an imposter as a husband because you're just not feeling like you could be as good as you could be, well, what's your system to improve yourself as a husband, right? Same thing in your business and so on and so forth. If you don't have a clarity around what you're doing to get to that place where you don't feel like an imposter, of course you're going to feel like an imposter. The other side of this is if you don't feel like an imposter, you're not doing a good job. Because we have to be pushing ourselves. Yeah. If you're not feeling like an imposter in your business, in your leadership, in your parenting, in your marriages, then you're really not pushing yourself hard enough. So embrace the imposter, figure out what's broken in that you can learn from, push yourself through it. And then, maybe for a season, you won't feel like an imposter, but if you don't feel like one for too long, you're probably too comfortable. And so welcome that imposter, be grateful for it because it's teaching you there's something going on here in your mindset. There's something going on here in your habits that you can learn from. Yeah. So it can be actually a rewarding catalyst rather than a hindrance.
Geez, I love how you reframe that. That's just to be able to change that mindset on what that imposter syndrome is actually telling us, as opposed to having it be something that's so detrimental and takes the energy from us. We can actually pivot that now in that moment and have it be something that truly is that catalyst to take us to that next level. So I love the way you put that together. Of everything that we've talked about today, and maybe there's something we haven't touched on yet, if there was one takeaway that you would like the audience to have with them today, what would that be?
Can I do two?
You can do two, bud.
They'll be short, but I'll do two. So the first one is what I've already talked about, which is that active accountability. Obviously we have to be self-accountable. We all get that, but find another man in your life, reach out to him today. If you don't have a partner, reach out to him and say, hey man, let's meet together and let's talk about the goals you want to achieve. It will change your life and his life forever. You talk about impact. So do that. Number two, and we didn't talk about it at all, but ask questions. Ask questions. Quit telling people what to do. And I'm a hypocrite because I'm kind of telling you that right now, but ask powerful questions. And if you don't know how to do that, study it. Study how to ask questions. Learn how to do that. That will also change your life. And you will become a better husband, a better father, a better leader, a better friend, because you're busy asking questions and not telling. And that fundamentally changes everything. And you learn a lot from asking questions, and other people learn a lot when you ask them questions, because in this world, people don't spend a ton of time listening to each other deeply, and people don't spend a lot of time asking those important, meaningful questions. So I want to challenge the men to find that accountability partner and learn how to ask him powerful questions. And obviously learn how to ask your kids and your wife powerful questions. And I find with 3 girls that I get to practice asking questions, and it's okay. They're girls and they're little and they're young. And if I mess it up, it's okay, because I'm just figuring out, it's like my practice field of asking questions. But those would be the 2 things that I want to strongly encourage.
Oh, that's outstanding. Love that. I just want to say thanks, Kyle, for spending time with me today. And, we unpacked quite a bit about what it means to have some cadence of accountability in our lives and our businesses and in all aspects of how we live. And so if somebody wanted to get involved with your work and any of your programs, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, go to sagemindset.com. And I love just chatting with people. It's not a sales pitch. It's a conversation to learn a little bit about what you're doing, what you're up to. So sagemindset.com is a great way to do that. And then just look up Sage Mindset. I've got a podcast. I have courses. I have a book, all that stuff. So you can look up Sage Mindset and you'll find me in that way too.
Right on. Well, I'll make sure I put all that information as well as your socials in the show notes for today. I really appreciate you being on the show today. Thanks so much, Kyle.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net. and start forging a new destiny today.